Hey everybody, good morning, it's Rob Moffett. Guys, I haven't done any history videos in ages. I thought it'd be fun to do one this morning. My family came to Miami, I think I mentioned before, 1919. If you would have come to Miami in 1919, this line right here is 27th Avenue. Everything west of this line would have been the Everglades. And when they came here, my dad's family, they stayed and bought property along the river here, and this is where my dad grew up. Of course, during the Depression, they couldn't afford the taxes; they lost everything. But this right here is one of the most historically significant areas of Miami. If you look, this is the river, and this is 27th Avenue. Right here is really a little tiny island. Back in 1845, the Ferguson brothers started a little mill here, and they milled lumber, but they also made starch from the Coonties plant that was growing in the Everglades. And that starch that they got from the Coonties plant was one of the first manufactured products here in South Florida that was sold all over the country. This river had a waterfall right about here, and it's extended for about the rapids about 400 or 500 feet, and the waterfall had a drop of about 6 feet, which meant it was very difficult for boat traffic to get any farther than this. Now this, if I expand it, you can see the water comes up right here and it peters out to where there's hardly anything. But when the water rises or it's really rainy, sometimes you would get water in this creek. I used to work right over here for 17 years. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this is where they had the mill, 1845. It was the first really significant manufacturing business concern here in South Florida, other than farming. Now, I was living in Miami, and I was working over here at Dade Reagents, or Baxter. It has 3 or 4 or 5 names because it changed hands over the years. And I got tired of driving on I-95. So many bad things was happening to me. I decided to move to this apartment over here. And when I told my dad where I had moved to, because I didn't see him that often, he said, "You should go visit your aunt." And I didn't realize she lived over here. I hardly ever talked about her. And I didn't know that side of the family very well. But I come to find out that they owned property all the way to over here. And my cousin had managed this little motel during the war. And allegedly, John F. Kennedy stayed here in this motel when he and other naval officers were undergoing training for the PT boats here on Biscayne Bay in Miami. Not a lot of people know that. The officers would come off base and live over here, away from everything, because over here was Everglades, west of the road, and they would stay there. And some of them would come up in a launch. You could bring a PT boat, but it was very shallow here. They'd have to back out and everything. So I think they would just bring their Navy launches, or they'd drive a car, and they would spend time here. But this was where JFK stayed when he was here during the war. Now, when I lived here, I used to walk to work every day, a couple blocks away, over here to Dade Reagents. Now, every day I would pass this little house right here on 17th Street. It had barbed wire all around it. They busted this little house for drug money. It was the largest drug bust, I think, for money even up to today. It was millions and millions of dollars. It wasn't any drugs, it was just money. It was like the Federal Reserve of the drug cartels was right here. I used to pass it every single day. Now, where I worked was semi-interesting. There was a doctor back in the 50s. He started a little company. He bought this little building here. It was a German-American club, and then it expanded, and they bought this building, which was a pumping station. Then he built all these other buildings. He ended up with 3 different plants in Miami, 2,000 people making pharmaceuticals and diagnostic reagents. And eventually, we got in some hard times, and Bain Capital bought us out, and then they sliced and diced the company and threw 2,000 people out on the street, and they all lost their jobs. But that's not that interesting. What's really interesting is if you go across the street, this little building right here, this was the Fleischer Studios for Popeye cartoons. The Fleischer Studios, Dave and Max Fleischer, they purchased this building, brought everybody down from New York. In 1938, began producing the Popeye cartoons here in Miami, and he employed a lot of people here in Miami to make the cartoons, which was kind of cool because just up the street, right here, is the Miami River, so there was like a lot of maritime stuff going on here, and I always thought it was a cool location for them. But they came out with a movie, actually two of them, and the second one came out like 41, right when the war started, and they just eventually lost a lot of money, and they sold, I think, to Paramount. And now, if you go across this little bridge, you come down here to Palmer Lake. Right here is Jones Boatyard. We had in the 80s, when Miami was going crazy with drugs, it was like a waterfall of drugs everywhere, cocaine, millions and millions and millions of dollars every month coming into Miami. There was a lot of crooked cops because they really started hiring people that, well, the requirements were lowered. They were trying to get people, and they really got some really bad eggs, some bad apples, and they just took to thievery like ducks to water. What they did, they were robbing all the drug people and taking their money in drugs. Well, there was a ship here full of drugs, and a bunch of cops raided it, and it was not official raid. It was just the crooked cop raid. They were going to take all the drugs and money for themselves. Well, what happened is a bunch of the guys on the boat didn't know how to swim, and they jumped overboard to get away from the cops, and they drowned. So about 6 people dead floating in the water. And the Miami Herald ignored almost everything for years and years, and they couldn't ignore that. And that's when things started changing. Of course, when they had people shooting machine guns at the Dolphin shopping mall, that didn't help either. But this is Palmer Lake. It's a great little place to dock your boat if a hurricane comes. If you go back to where I started, the waterfall that was here, eventually they got rid of it. I think the water levels changed. Also, they might have dynamited a lot of it. But right here at the where this little island meets this part of the river, there was an Indian site that was basically for tourists. And this was called Musa Isle. There was some farming going on, and people would come from Miami on excursion boats up the river, and they would spend the day. They had an observation tower that was very tall. They could look out into the Everglades. And there was roller rinks and musical attractions and food and stuff. But the tower disintegrated from termites after a while, and they started something new here in 1919. They had a little Seminole Indian village where the Indians would wrestle the alligators. They would have fake marriages, and which was really cool. My dad told me that the water in the river was very dark from tannic acid or tannin from the sort of plants, the leaves and stuff would turn the water brown, and it was hard to see. Well, the Indians, what they would do is when the boats came up, they would dive in the water and have the tourists throw coins in the water, and they would dive down and get the coins and bring up to the surface and show the tourists. When the tourists left on the boat, the Indians would get in the water, and they had a big screen on the bottom of the water, so when the tourists throw the coins down, it would get on the screen. So they would just pull the screen up and get all the coins off. And I thought that was hilarious. I'd love to get a metal detector, go underwater, and see if there's any coins there from years ago. But there's a lot of things going on. Just this little tiny area, so many things, and you would never know it if you didn't investigate or live there. And it's I think the history of Miami is fascinating. And I'm going to do some more videos on the river, and maybe the place I worked, it was kind of interesting. And the islands out in the bay, and the wonderful crime dramas we've had, and the hurricanes and the social disorders and the pest and the everything that's made Miami wonderful. Hope this was something that you guys enjoyed. And the reason I'm not using Google Earth is because my computer keeps crashing when I try to use it. So we're just using Google Maps today. So I hope you don't mind. But next time you go down 27th Avenue and you go over the bridge, take a peek over to the east and look at this little building. I think it's for sale right now. There's hardly anybody there. When I went on Google Maps, it looked like the place was empty. But this was where JFK stayed. And they had Musa Isle and the Indians and the alligator wrestling and the drug money and the waterfall and the lumber mill and the Coontie plant and all right here. So I hope that was something fun for you guys to watch. Guys, I enjoyed this. I'll do more. Take care. See you out there.